Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a cultural and spiritual phenomenon that has literally captivated millions around the globe. We're talking about the ancient allure of Toltec wisdom, specifically how it's presented in Don Miguel Ruiz's massive bestseller, The Four Agreements. Now, on one side of the spectrum, readers swear this book holds the cosmic laws to absolute personal freedom and happiness. But on the other side, critics argue it's just a beautifully packaged collection of common sense, or worse, a dangerous oversimplification of complex human struggles. Our goal today is to really unpack its true value, relying strictly on our curated sources, which range from academic theses all the way to psychological analyses and critical reviews. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is how we're breaking it down. 1. The Toltec wisdom. 2. The Four Agreements. 3. Leadership and healthcare. 4. The shield of immunity. And 5. The critical lens.
Section 1. The Toltec wisdom and domestication. So, to really grasp these agreements, we first have to understand where they supposedly come from. The Toltecs were this indigenous Mesoamerican culture of incredible warriors, scientists, and artists living in Mexico around 1,000 years ago. According to the source material, they held on to this very unique, deeply guarded wisdom about life, human behavior, and emotional balance.
Now, out of this comes a really fascinating concept, domestication. The text argues that from the very moment we're born, we are domesticated by society, our parents, our schools. We're taught this complex set of rules and expectations through a pretty rigid system of punishment and obedience. Think about it. If we obey, we get attention and praise. If we disobey, we get punished. This system basically forces us into agreements about who we are and what we're worth, which often severely limits our true potential. So the stakes here are pretty high. To achieve genuine personal freedom, we have to break these restrictive old structures and consciously make new agreements.
All right, Section 2. The Four Agreements. This is where Don Miguel Ruiz steps in. Ruiz was actually a traditional Mexican surgeon, but after surviving a near-fatal car accident, he experienced this profound shift. He transitioned away from focusing purely on modern science and started exploring spirituality and his own Toltec ancestry. What he did was synthesize what he learned into a remarkably accessible framework that has resonated across completely different cultures worldwide.
And here is that exact framework. 1. Be impeccable with your word. 2. Don't take anything personally. 3. Don't make assumptions. And 4. Always do your best. Now, seeing them all together like this, they appear almost disarmingly simple, right? But let's break down the deeper meaning behind each one, starting with the first.
The first agreement is to be impeccable with your word. Fun fact, the Latin root of the word impeccable literally means without sin. So in this context, sinning against yourself means judging or blaming yourself. The sources highlight that words are incredibly powerful. They're described almost like a form of magic. They can liberate you or they can entirely enslave you and everyone around you. The crucial takeaway is to use your words in the direction of truth and love, rather than weaponizing them against yourself through negative self-talk or against others through gossip.
The second agreement is don't take it personally. This principle asserts that what other people say and do to you, it's actually not about you at all. It's a projection of their own reality, their own dreams, and their own fears. Humans are highly emotional creatures, and when someone reacts negatively to you, they're just dealing with their own internal world. True balance and freedom come when you know exactly who you are, accepting your flaws and strengths, so you no longer need that external acceptance to feel secure.
Moving on to the third agreement. Don't make assumptions. We all jump to conclusions, right? We assume someone is mad at us if they don't say hello, or we make negative assumptions about our own capabilities just because we're afraid of failing. This creates a dense fog of misunderstanding in our minds and, honestly, a lot of unnecessary drama in our lives. The solution provided here is incredibly simple but demanding. Just find the courage to ask questions. Asking questions clears that fog and grounds you in actual reality, rather than some false narrative you made up.
Finally, the fourth agreement. Always do your best. This is essentially the action step that anchors the other three. But what's really crucial to understand here is that your best is not some static, unchanging level of perfection. Your best fluctuates from day to day and even from moment to moment, based on your health, your stress levels, and your environment. The key is that your motivation has to come from the interior. If you're only doing something for an external reward, like money or status, it just leads to frustration. But if you do your best simply for the pure joy of doing it, you avoid self-judgment and regret entirely.
Section 3. Leadership and Healthcare. Now you might be wondering, how does ancient Toltec wisdom apply to the modern, fast-paced world? Well, it turns out it can be applied in some of the most high-stress, high-stakes environments imaginable.
Take this master's thesis from California State University's San Bernardino, authored by Dulce Morales. It takes Ruiz's 4 agreements and applies them directly to healthcare, administration, and leadership. It argues that leaders in healthcare can actually use these spiritual tools to connect with their inner selves, ultimately creating a more proactive, effective management style that improves both team morale and patient outcomes.
The thesis links the 4 agreements to 3 core leadership traits, perfectly mapping them onto historical medical figures. Transparency is linked to Dr. Quinones Hinojosa, who built immense trust by keeping his teams aware and being open to feedback, which sounds exactly like not making assumptions and speaking impeccably, right? Positivity is tied to Dr. Patch Adams, who created optimal patient outcomes by bringing out the best in people. And authenticity is matched with Florence Nightingale, the pioneer of nursing, who led by example, practiced deep self-awareness, and just focused on doing the right thing.
And this brilliantly illustrates how balancing authenticity, transparency, and positivity, traits that are nurtured by practicing these 4 agreements, doesn't just make you a spiritually enlightened person, it makes you an incredibly effective healthcare leader. You build a team that is loyal, empathetic, and totally committed to the best possible outcomes for the patients. It's a fantastic example of taking abstract philosophy and turning it into grounded, daily practice.
Section 4, the shield of immunity. We're going to zoom in specifically on the psychology of that second agreement, don't take anything personally, because our sources indicate this is often the most transformative, yet definitely the most difficult concept to master.
According to an analysis from Psych Central, taking things personally makes you highly vulnerable. When you absorb the opinions and projections of others, you become easy prey, essentially choosing to eat the emotional poison that someone else is projecting onto you. On the flip side, when you don't take things personally, you realize you are only responsible for yourself, not for the actions or words of anyone else. That detachment, it provides a massive sense of true emotional freedom.
There's this really powerful quote featured on Psych Central that states, "Immunity in the middle of hell is the gift of this agreement." Think about that. If you can master this, the world can gossip about you, people can intentionally try to send you emotional poison, but if you don't take it personally, you simply won't consume it. It acts as an absolute, impenetrable shield for your mental health.
Section 5, the critical lens. As with any explainer we do, we absolutely must look at all sides of the source material impartially. While many revere this book as completely life-changing, it also faces significant and very valid criticisms, particularly regarding how its generalized statements hold up in complex, real-world situations.
The core debate basically looks like this. The idealized view celebrates the book for offering profound personal freedom and spiritual empowerment with very simple rules. However, the critical view, as highlighted in a review from Becoming Carmen, argues that the book severely oversimplifies complex trauma, systemic issues, and mental health conditions. Critics argue that deeply ingrained societal issues cannot always be untangled with a couple of mantras and a highlighter pen.
The reviewer from Becoming Carmen points out a very specific danger in taking the book's spiritual claims too literally, noting, implying that a mindset can summon cancer within a short period is, frankly, irresponsible. This highlights a real-world danger of New Age philosophies that stretch the mind-body connection a bit too far. It can potentially lead to victim blaming, where people feel responsible for their own physical illnesses simply because they supposedly had a negative mindset.
Furthermore, this raises a deeply critical question. Can not taking things personally actually be harmful? Reviewers referencing essays by Bobby Wood and Helene Belande argue that in contexts of systemic discrimination, toxic workplaces, or outright abuse, telling someone to simply not take it personally can be incredibly damaging. It risks oversimplifying the very real need for strong, actionable emotional boundaries, and it might inadvertently encourage individuals to tolerate unacceptable behavior under the guise of spiritual enlightenment.
Which brings us to our final thought, and the ultimate question for you to consider today. Having seen the ancient origins, the practical applications in modern healthcare, and those valid psychological critiques, will you use these agreements as a powerful tool for your own personal freedom, or will you challenge them when they oversimplify the complex realities of your life? Perhaps the true wisdom lies in knowing exactly when to apply the agreements and when to rewrite them. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.